Summer at Grandpa's farm. The dust swirled behind the pickup, a tawny plume that dissolved as Grandpa Joe braked before the farmhouse. Billy Wrench Walker erupted from the cab, the slam of the screen door punctuating his arrival. He inhaled deeply, the earthy fragrance of hay and soil a stark contrast to the city's fumes. Wow, he breathed, his gaze sweeping the landscape. The farmhouse, time-worn yet resolute, commanded a vista of ripening grain. The barn, a colossal wooden edifice, stood sentinel in the distance, hinting at untold adventures. A chorus of crickets chirped a rural welcome, punctuated by a distant bovine bellow. A warm, guttural chuckle rumbled from Grandpa Joe. "Welcome to Walker Farm, Billy. Your summer command center." He tousled Billy's hair with a surprisingly gentle, calloused hand. "Ready for some elbow grease?" "Born for it," Billy beamed, already drawn towards the barn. "Hold on there, hotshot," Grandpa Joe called after him, amusement coloring his tone. "Unpack your gear first, and chow down. Even ace mechanics run on fuel." Reluctantly, Billy followed him inside, the cool, shadowy interior a reprieve from the sun's intensity. It smelled of cinnamon and aged timber, radiating cozy familiarity. After a swift meal of ham sandwiches and iced tea, Billy gained his freedom to explore. The barn was even more imposing at close range. Sunlight speared through cracks in the plank walls, illuminating swirling particles of dust. The air was thick with the aroma of lubricant, iron, and seasoned wood. Billy's fingers itched, yearning to touch everything. Tools of every conceivable shape and purpose adorned the walls, their metal surfaces reflecting the light in muted gleams. Wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, a true arsenal for a young mechanic. A massive tractor, its paint faded and flaking, dominated the barn's center, its tires towering over Billy. It resembled a dormant behemoth. He circled it, his palm gliding over the cool steel. He grasped the fundamentals, spark plugs, carburetors, ignition coils, yet this felt different. This was tangible. This was legacy. "She's seen better days," Grandpa Joe remarked, appearing at his side. He rested a hand on the tractor's hood, a gesture of fond familiarity. "But she's still got some fight left. Just needs a little persuasion now and then." Billy's eyes sparked with excitement. "What's ailing her?" "Oh, a touch of this, a touch of that," Grandpa Joe said vaguely. "The usual complaints of old age. But the real headache is the harvester. The combine, specifically. Keeps shredding belts. Can't bring in the wheat if the combine's down." He sighed, dragging a hand across his weathered face. "And the harvest is breathing down our necks." Billy's focus sharpened onto a formidable machine lurking in the barn's corner, partially veiled by a tarp. Even beneath the grime, its size was clear. He yanked back the canvas, revealing the combine harvester in its full, imposing glory. "This is it?" he questioned, all lacing his voice. "That's her," Grandpa Joe confirmed. "The linchpin to a profitable year. And right now, she's about as useful as a paperweight." Billy moved around the dormant machine, his mind already whirring. He noted a tattered belt hanging listlessly, validating Grandpa Joe's assessment. He poked and prodded, his fingers tracing the intricate network of cogs and straps. "What kind of belts does she use?" Billy inquired, already formulating a plan of attack. "They're custom-made," Grandpa Joe responded, frustration evident in his voice. "A bear to find. Cost an arm and a leg to replace. And even then, they don't last. The entire system needs adjustment, but I haven't found the time." Billy nodded, internalizing the information. He could discern the wear and tear, the echoes of years of demanding labor and waning maintenance. He knew it wouldn't be a breeze, but the challenge ignited something in him. He imagined the satisfaction of bringing the slumbering giant back to life. "I think I can get her running," Billy declared, his voice measured but assured. Grandpa Joe raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his features. "Think you can, huh? That's a monumental task, Billy. Beyond anything you've tackled before." "I know," Billy responded, meeting his grandfather's gaze squarely. "But I learned fast, and I'm not afraid to get my knuckles scraped." Grandpa Joe scrutinized him for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, a gradual smile broke across his face. "All right, Billy, let's see what you've got. But don't go ripping things apart willy-nilly. This old girl's got more miles on her than you do, and she don't take kindly to being rushed." "Deal," Billy agreed, his grin widening. He selected a wrench from the wall, the cool metal molding perfectly to his grip. The aroma of oil and metal enveloped him, and the chirping of the crickets receded into the background. He was home. This was where he was meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting long shadows across the barn floor, Billy embarked on his initial inspection, his thoughts already absorbed by the intricate machinery of the combine harvester. The harvest was imminent, and he had a behemoth to awaken. The mighty harvester breaks down. The Agri-Tech Solutions harvester, a behemoth of chrome and crimson paint, roared through the wheat field like a metallic leviathan. Dust billowed in its wake, a golden cloud against the azure sky. Billy watched from the edge of the field, a wrench instinctively tightening in his grip. He'd spent the morning helping Grandpa Joe with odd jobs, but his gaze kept drifting back to the harvester, the king of the harvest, now chewing its way through the ripened grain. Inside the cab, Grandpa Joe gripped the controls, his weathered face etched with concentration. Beside him, Miguel, one of the farmhands, adjusted the radio, searching for a station that wasn't static. The air crackled with the smell of diesel and the low thrum of the engine, a symphony of harvest. Then, the music stuttered, replaced by a high-pitched whine that seemed to vibrate in Billy's teeth. The Leviathan coughed, sputtered, and lurched violently, throwing up a plume of black smoke that blotted out the sun. The engine died with a final, shuddering groan, leaving a silence so profound it was almost deafening. Billy sprinted towards the stricken machine, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He reached the harvester just as Grandpa Joe and Miguel clambered down, their faces grim. "What happened?" Billy asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Grandpa Joe wiped a smear of grease across his forehead, leaving a dark streak against his tanned skin. "Sounds like she threw a belt, or worse. Something in the threshing unit. Maybe—" He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dry earth. "Damn machine. Always something." Miguel kicked at a loose clod of dirt, his expression mirroring Grandpa Joe's frustration. "We're barely a quarter of the way through. At this rate, the wheat will be rotting in the fields before we can get to it." Grandpa Joe ignored him, circling the harvester like a wary predator. He ran a hand along the massive tires, then peered into the exposed engine compartment. "See anything obvious, Billy?" Billy circled the machine, his eyes scanning every belt, every pulley, every connection. The smell of burnt rubber hung heavy in the air. He poked and prodded, his fingers tracing the lines of the complex machinery. "Can't tell from here, Grandpa. Looks like it might be something internal." Grandpa Joe grunted. "Internal. Just what I didn't want to hear." He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "Gotta call Agri-Tech. See if they can send someone out." The call, as expected, was a disaster. Agri-Tech was swamped. Harvest season meant every farmer within a 100-mile radius was demanding immediate service. The earliest they could send a technician, according to the bored voice on the other end of the line, was 3 days. 3 days. An eternity in harvest time. Grandpa Joe slammed the phone shut, his face a mask of fury. 3 days. They might as well tell us to pack it in now. He kicked the tire again, harder this time. "Damn fancy machines. Give me an old Massey Ferguson any day. At least you could fix those with a hammer and a prayer." Miguel muttered something under his breath in Spanish, his shoulders slumped with defeat. Billy, however, felt a surge of adrenaline. 3 days was unacceptable. He knew, deep down, that he could fix this. He just needed a chance. "Grandpa, let me take a look," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "I might be able to figure something out." Grandpa Joe stared at him, his eyes narrowed. "You? Fix this technological nightmare? Don't be ridiculous, Billy. This ain't some lawnmower engine." "I know, Grandpa, but I've worked on engines bigger than this. Just give me a chance. What do we got to lose?" Agritech isn't coming for 3 days anyway. The desperation in Billy's voice must have registered. Grandpa Joe hesitated, his anger battling with the stark reality of their situation. Finally, he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "All right, Billy, go ahead, but don't go tearing anything apart. And be careful." Billy grinned, his spirits lifting. "I will, Grandpa. I promise." He grabbed his toolbox and approached the harvester, his eyes already dissecting the machine, searching for the source of the catastrophic failure. The setting sun cast long shadows across the field, turning the broken harvester into a dark silhouette against the fiery sky. The race against time had begun. Mr. Thompson arrives. The thwack, thwack, thwack of helicopter blades vibrated through the dry earth, sending dust devils dancing across the harvested wheat fields. Grandpa Joe shielded his eyes, a grin set to his jaw. Miguel, perched atop the Agritech behemoth, squinted, his earlier anxiety now sharpened with anticipation. Billy, however, didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on the wrench, his focus unwavering as he traced a greasy finger along a hydraulic line. The helicopter, a sleek, black machine emblazoned with the Agritech Solutions logo, descended with the precision of a hawk, landing with a surprisingly gentle bump in the freshly cleared field beside the main barn. The door swung open, and Mr. Sterling Thompson emerged, his suit impeccably pressed despite the rural setting. He strode forward, radiating an aura of impatience and controlled fury. Two men in crisp white shirts and khakis, clearly engineers, hurried to keep pace. "Joe," Thompson barked, his voice cutting through the hum of the idling helicopter. "What in God's name is going on here?" Grandpa Joe lowered his hand, his weathered face a mask of stoicism. "The harvester broke down, Mr. Thompson. You know that." "Broke down?" Thompson scoffed, his gaze sweeping over the immobile machine. "This isn't some rusty tractor, Joe. This is Agritech's flagship harvester, the Apex 5000. It's supposed to be virtually indestructible." He turned on his heel, his voice dripping with disdain as he addressed his engineers. "Well, what's the diagnosis? Don't tell me you two haven't figured it out yet. I was promised a fix by now." The taller of the two engineers, a man with thinning hair and perpetually worried eyes, stammered, "Sir, it's complex. The central processing unit seems to have experienced a catastrophic failure. We're running diagnostics, but—" Thompson cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Diagnostics? I don't pay you to run diagnostics. I pay you to fix things. This harvest is on the line. Every hour this machine is down, we're losing thousands. Thousands, do you understand?" He jabbed a finger towards a field. "That's not just wheat out there, gentlemen. That's money. My money. And it's evaporating as we stand here." He took a step closer to the harvester, his eyes narrowed. "So what's the holdup? Why isn't it fixed?" The shorter engineer, his face pale, piped up. "The CPU is proprietary, sir. We need schematics, access codes. It's not something we can just jury-rig." Thompson's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Jury-rig? Is that what you call it? This isn't some backwater operation. This is Agritech. We don't jury-rig. We innovate. We dominate. Now get to work. I want this machine running before the sun sets." He spun around, his attention finally landing on Billy, who hadn't moved an inch. Thompson's eyes raked over the young man, taking in his grease-stained jeans and determined expression. "And who is this?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Grandpa Joe hesitated. "That's Billy, Mr. Thompson. He's helping out." Thompson raised an eyebrow, his gaze hardening. "Helping out? By tinkering with my multi-million-dollar machine? Are you out of your mind, Joe? Get him away from there. He'll do more harm than good." Billy straightened, his eyes meeting Thompson's without flinching. "I think I can fix it, sir." Thompson let out a harsh laugh. "You? Fix it? You look barely old enough to drive a car, let alone understand the intricacies of advanced agricultural technology. Don't waste my time, kid. Leave the heavy lifting to the professionals." He gestured dismissively towards his engineers, who were now huddled around a laptop, their faces etched with frustration. Billy held up the wrench, its metal gleaming in the afternoon sun. With all due respect, sir, your professionals haven't done much fixing yet, and the harvest isn't going to wait. The air crackled with tension. Grandpa Joe watched, his face a mixture of apprehension and a flicker of something akin to hope. Miguel, still perched atop the harvester, held his breath. Thompson stared at Billy, his eyes narrowed, a silent battle of wills raging between them. The hum of the helicopter seemed to amplify the silence, each rotation of the blades a ticking clock counting down the precious hours of daylight. Thompson's jaw tightened. The stakes were higher than anyone here knew. He needed this harvest, needed it to prove to the board, to his investors, to himself, that Agritech Solutions was the future of farming. And this kid, this greasy, unknown kid, was standing between him and success. "All right," Thompson said, his voice dangerously low. "You've got 1 hour. 1 hour to prove you know what you're doing. If you can get this machine running, I'll eat my hat. But if you don't, if you make things worse, you and your grandpa will be hearing from my lawyers." A sarcastic suggestion. The chopper's thrum had long dissolved into the farm's chaotic soundscape, supplanted by the clang of tools and the Agritech mechanics' exasperated bellows. Sweat glued strands to their foreheads as they grappled with oily mechanisms, their expressions tight with focus, or perhaps outright panic. The afternoon sun had deepened, stretching long shadows from the stalled harvester, a steel testament to Thompson's impending embarrassment. Billy Wrench, Walker watched from the fence, a silent sentinel. Initially, he'd held back, not wanting to meddle with supposed experts, but the insistent feeling that he could offer assistance had grown with each botched attempt. He worried a stalk of straw between his teeth, his gaze tracing the machine's anatomy. Severed wires, stripped threads, puddles of hydraulic fluid marring the thirsty soil. The air was thick, laced with the sharp bite of ozone from a carelessly abandoned welding torch mingling with the reek of oil. Thompson stalked back and forth, his polished loafers kicking up miniature dust storms. He snapped orders that vanished into the air, his face flaming a furious red. He even snatched a wrench, only to clumsily drop it with a clatter. The greased-overalled engineer merely sighed and reached for another implement. The team huddled, their voices a low, urgent murmur. Billy picked up fragments, sensor glitch, control panel dead, fried the circuit board clean. He stifled a sigh. They were chasing phantoms, addressing effects, blind to the root. He'd seen this dance before, tinkering with his father's vintage tractors. Thompson flung his hands skyward in a display of raw frustration. "This is beyond belief. Millions invested in this thing, and not a single one of you can crack it? I should sack you all." The mechanics remained mute, their shoulders slumped in defeat. They knew the outburst was just hot air, but the sting remained. They were masters of their craft, but this harvester, this beast, was a different story. Billy levered himself off the fence, the straw scattering to the ground. He couldn't bear to watch the slow-motion disaster. The harvest hung in the balance, livelihoods swayed in the wind, and this farce was achieving nothing. He began striding toward the group, his boots crunching on the sun-baked earth. Well, Thompson drawled, his voice dripping with condescension as he spotted Billy approaching. "If it isn't our local prodigy." He twisted the last word into an insult. Billy halted a few feet away, unfazed by Thompson's withering tone. He'd stared down far worse than an irate CEO. "I might be able to lend a hand," he offered, his voice steady and calm. Thompson barked out a harsh laugh. "You? Help? You're barely out of diapers. What could you possibly know about cutting-edge agricultural tech?" "Apparently more than your crew," Billy shot back, unable to resist the dig. He instantly regretted the barb as he saw the pulse hammering in Thompson's temple. "That's it," Thompson roared, his face darkening to a dangerous crimson. "I've had enough of your impudence. One more word, and you're gone." Billy stood his ground, but held his tongue. He knew he had to tread carefully. He needed permission to work, and antagonizing Thompson wouldn't unlock that door. The lead engineer, sensing a sliver of opportunity, stepped forward tentatively. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, we've exhausted every avenue. Time is slipping away. Perhaps Perhaps there's no harm in letting him take a look. Thompson glared at the engineer, then pivoted back to Billy. He weighed them both, his eyes narrowed, calculating. Pride wrestled with despair. Finally, he exhaled a sigh of capitulation. Fine, he conceded, his voice thick with reluctance. Fine, go ahead. Be my guest. But if you botch this even further, kid, I'm holding you personally liable. He paused, a cruel grin creeping across his face. Actually, I'll propose something. You fancy yourself so clever? You get one shot, one chance. If you can resurrect this metal monstrosity by sundown, I'll give you a job at Agritech. Anything you want. Billy's eyes widened. He hadn't anticipated that. But Thompson pressed on, his tone hardening. If you fail, if you so much as smudge the paint, I'm filing charges for trespassing and meddling. Understood. Billy swallowed, his mouth suddenly parched. The stakes had just skyrocketed. He glanced at the sinking sun, then back at the gargantuan machine, its steel frame glinting ominously. So what do you say, was kid? Thompson challenged, arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on his features. Think you're up to it? He gave a mirthless chuckle. Go on, amaze me. Billy takes the challenge. Billy's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum solo against the backdrop of Thompson's arrogant pronouncements. Sundown. It wasn't just about a job. It was about his grandfather's livelihood, the legacy of the farm, and proving to himself that he wasn't just some grease-stained kid with a wrench. He glanced at his grandfather, whose face was a mask of worry etched deeper than the furrows in his fields. He swallowed hard, the dryness in his throat amplified by the dust swirling around the immobile harvester. All right, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. I'll do it. A collective murmur rippled through the small crowd. Thompson's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then settled into a smug, almost predatory grin. Excellent. I admire your enthusiasm, boy. But enthusiasm doesn't fix a combine. Ignoring Thompson, Billy focused on the task ahead. He needed tools. Real tools, not the fancy, computerized diagnostics those Agritech mechanics were fumbling with. He turned toward his truck, parked a short distance away. Grandpa, he called, can you grab my toolbox from the back? The big one, with the snap-on latches. His grandfather, momentarily stunned by Billy's audacity, snapped to attention. Relief, mixed with a healthy dose of skepticism, flickered in his eyes. He hurried to the truck, the metal clanging of the toolbox a reassuring sound in the tense atmosphere. As his grandfather wrestled the heavy box from the truck bed, Billy took a deep breath, tried to visualize the inner workings of the harvester. He'd spent countless hours as a kid, clambering around his father's machines, learning the language of gears and belts, the symphony of pistons and valves. It was more than just mechanics. It was intuition, a feel for the rhythm of the engine. The toolbox landed with a thud beside him. Billy knelt, unlatching the clasps. The familiar scent of oil, grease, and metal washed over him, a comforting aroma that calmed his nerves. He selected a few essential tools, a sturdy socket wrench, a set of screwdrivers, and his trusty multimeter. He left the rest, a testament to his confidence. He stood, the tools feeling like an extension of his own hands. He looked at the hulking harvester, a metal behemoth that had brought the harvest to a standstill. It loomed over him, a mechanical dragon guarding its hoard of grain. The Agritech mechanics, their faces a mixture of amusement and disbelief, watched from a safe distance. Thompson stood closer, arms crossed, a hawk eyeing its prey. Without a word, Billy walked toward the harvester. He circled it slowly, his eyes scanning every inch of its massive frame. He ran a hand along the cold, unyielding metal, feeling for vibrations, listening for any telltale signs of the problem within. The sun was already beginning its descent, casting long, ominous shadows across the field. Time was ticking. He reached the engine compartment, the heart of the beast. The access panel was partially open, revealing a tangle of wires and hoses. He could smell the acrid tang of burnt electrical components. This wasn't just a simple breakdown. Something serious had gone wrong. He slipped on a pair of worn leather gloves, a ritual he'd performed countless times before. This wasn't just about fixing a machine. It was about honoring his family's legacy, about proving that skill and determination could triumph over arrogance and doubt. He took another deep breath, the scent of diesel fuel filling his lungs. "All right," he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible above the hum of the surrounding machinery. "Let's see what you're hiding." Grease, gears, and determination. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with the scent of diesel and sun-baked earth. Billy wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime across his forehead. He circled the behemoth, the harvester looming over him like a metal leviathan, its broken state a stark challenge. He started with the engine, its exposed guts a tangle of wires, belts, and greasy gears. He ran a hand along a thick, frayed belt, the rubber crumbling beneath his fingertips. "Grandpa got a 10mm socket wrench," he called out, his voice cutting through the drone of crickets. Caleb, who had been leaning against the barn, arms crossed, pushed himself upright and shuffled toward his toolbox. He rummaged around for a moment, then tossed the requested wrench to Billy, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Billy attacked the engine systematically. He loosened bolts, disconnected wires, and tugged at hoses, his movements fluid and practiced. The other agri-tech engineers, initially dismissive, started to watch with a grudging curiosity. Thompson, however, remained impassive, his arms still crossed, a smug look etched on his face. "Think you'll find anything in there, farm boy?" Thompson finally drawled, his voice laced with condescension. Billy didn't look up. "Just diagnosing the patient, sir," he replied, his voice calm and steady. He continued his work, oblivious to Thompson's taunts. After an hour, he straightened up, stretching his back. "Okay, I need a compression tester and a fuel pressure gauge." One of the engineers, a young woman with short, practical hair, raised an eyebrow. "Those aren't exactly standard farm tools," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "I know," Billy replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "But I have a feeling we're going to need them." Caleb grunted. "Got a compression tester somewhere. Fuel pressure gauge, that'll be in the back of the truck." He disappeared into the barn, returning a few minutes later with the requested tools. Billy worked quickly, attaching the tester and gauge to the engine. He cranked the engine, watching the needles jump and settle. His brow furrowed. "Compression's low on cylinder 4, he announced, his voice low and serious. "And fuel pressure's all over the place. Could be a clog injector, but I doubt it." He paused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "I need to check the timing belt. Got a strobe timing light." The young engineer's eyes widened. "He's going deep," she muttered to her colleague, who nodded in agreement. Even Thompson seemed momentarily taken aback. Caleb retrieved the timing light, handing it to Billy without a word. As Billy connected the light and started the engine, the strobe illuminated the crankshaft pulley, revealing the timing marks. Billy squinted, adjusting the light. "Yup, timing's off," he declared. "Way off. The belt must have slipped." "A slip timing belt?" Thompson scoffed. "That's hardly catastrophic. We would have checked that." Billy finally turned to face Thompson, his eyes narrowed. "Maybe you would have, but you didn't. And a slip timing belt on this engine can cause serious damage. Bent valves, cracked pistons. It's a ticking time bomb." He turned back to the engine, his movements becoming even more deliberate. "Okay, I need a new timing belt, a set of valve cover gaskets, and a torque wrench that goes up to 150 foot-pounds." He paused. "And, if we're lucky, we won't need a new set of valves." The young engineer scrambled to find the parts, her initial skepticism replaced with a sense of urgency. Even the other engineers started to move with a renewed purpose, rummaging through their trucks and toolboxes. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the farm. The air, still thick with the smell of diesel, now carried a faint undercurrent of nervous anticipation. The fate of the harvest, and perhaps the farm itself, hung in the balance, suspended between the failing light and the steady rhythm of Billy's wrench. The harvester roars to life. Billy wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. The new timing belt, scavenged from a dusty corner of the Agritech warehouse after what felt like an eternity, was finally in place. He double-checked the tension, his fingers tracing the rubber with practiced ease. Almost there, he muttered, more to himself than to the small crowd that had gathered. Thompson stood apart, his face a mask of barely controlled fury and a sliver of something else. Was it hope? He checked his watch again, the movement sharp and impatient. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A beautiful spectacle, but a cruel reminder of the rapidly dwindling time. Just needs a little coaxing, Billy said, reaching for the starter. He took a breath, a silent prayer escaping his lips. He hadn't felt this nervous since his first engine rebuild back in high school. He turned the key. Nothing. A collective groan rippled through the onlookers. Thompson's face darkened. I knew it. A waste of time. A complete and utter. Billy ignored him, his focus laser-locked on the harvester's instrument panel. He tried again. This time, there was a hesitant cough, a shudder that ran through the entire machine. The engine sputtered, choked, then fell silent. A puff of black smoke escaped the exhaust pipe, carrying with it the pungent smell of burnt oil. Damn, Billy breathed, his shoulders slumping slightly. He adjusted the fuel mixture, a subtle tweak learned from years of listening to engines, feeling their vibrations, understanding their needs. He knew the nuances of combustion, like some people knew the verses of song. He tried again. The engine turned over, slower this time, like a reluctant beast being roused from slumber. It coughed again, louder this time, a deeper, more resonant sound. Then a backfire, a sharp crack that echoed across the field, making everyone jump. Thompson swore under his breath. Just finish it already. Billy ignored him. He feathered the throttle, coaxing the engine, feeding it just the right amount of fuel. The sputtering grew more consistent, the coughing turning into a rhythmic chug. And then it happened. With a roar that shook the very ground beneath their feet, the harvester sprang to life. The engine settled into a powerful, steady thrum, a deep-chested rumble that vibrated through the air. The smell of exhaust filled the air, a potent mix of diesel and hot metal. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The Agritech engineers, who just hours ago had dismissed Billy as a naive farm boy, exchanged stunned glances. Caleb, leaning heavily on his cane, allowed a rare smile to spread across his weathered face. Thompson stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. He looked from the roaring harvester to Billy, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. Relief warred with something else, a grudging respect, perhaps, or maybe just plain confusion. The harvester idled smoothly, the giant combine head looming menacingly. It was a beast awakened, ready to devour the fields. Billy climbed down from the cab, his face grimy but triumphant. He wiped his hands on his overalls, the grease doing little to hide the satisfied grin that stretched across his face. She's ready to go, he said, his voice hoarse but clear. Thompson finally found his voice, though it was still laced with disbelief. How did you do that? Billy shrugged. Just listen to what she needed. Thompson circled the harvester, running his hand over the gleaming metal. He peered into the engine compartment, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was clear he was trying to understand what had just happened, to reconcile the roaring machine with the unassuming young man who had brought it back to life. He stopped in front of Billy, his gaze intense. All right, Walker, he said, the use of Billy's surname a subtle shift in tone. You got my attention. Now, let's see if it can actually harvest anything. The revelation. The harvester's engine, still hot to the touch, ticked over like a well-oiled clock. Its deep thrum resonated through the barn's skeletal framework, a far cry from the death throes it had exhibited mere hours earlier. Sunbeams, thick with floating dust, painted Billy's elated, yet weary, face as he stood before his handiwork. Thompson, however, remained a gathering storm. He circled the hulking machine, his expensive leather shoes stirring up miniature dust devils. Instead of admiration, suspicion etched itself onto his face as he critically examined every inch. He halted abruptly, his gaze locking onto Billy with unsettling intensity. "Walker," Thompson snapped, his voice a viper's strike in the barn's stillness. "Enough games. Explain yourself. How did you know about that bypass?" "That's a proprietary modification." Billy wiped a streak of grime across his forehead, leaving a dark smudge. He met Thompson's piercing stare without flinching. "Just worked it out. Worked it out." Thompson's derisive snort echoed in the cavernous space. "Don't treat me like a fool. You circumvented a safeguard that baffled even my own engineers. You knew precisely what you were doing." He jabbed a finger at the harvester. "That's not textbook stuff. That's intuitive knowledge." Billy hesitated. He'd revealed too much, too soon. The less this man knew, the better. But Thompson's relentless, almost aggressive questioning left him little choice. He drew a steadying breath. My father taught me," Billy confessed, the words feeling leaden. He searched Thompson's expression for recognition, but the CEO only looked impatient. "Your father?" Some hayseed mechanic dabbling in corporate espionage. A sneer twisted Thompson's lips. Billy's fists clenched. He fought down the urge to defend his father's name with a swift right hook. He understood engines. Inside and out. Anything mechanical, really. He could diagnose a problem just by listening. A wave of memories washed over him. His father's patient voice, his strong hands guiding Billy's, the sharp tang of oil and gasoline, the comforting rhythm of tools, the essence of his youth. "And?" Thompson pressed, his tone sharp. "What expertise does this engine whisperer possess that qualifies him to decipher my company's secrets?" Billy glanced down at his grimy hands. This was the precipice. He lifted his gaze, meeting Thompson's with newfound resolve. "He designed it," Billy stated, his voice ringing with certainty. "He designed the harvester. The whole thing." Silence descended, thick and heavy as the dust motes dancing in the light. The blood drained from Thompson's face, leaving him ashen. A flicker of something akin to dread replaced the steel in his eyes. What did you say?" Thompson sputtered, his voice suddenly frail. Billy held his gaze, unwavering. "My dad, John Miller. He was the lead designer. Before he disappeared." The effect was immediate. Thompson reeled backward, as if physically struck. His hand went to his collar, tugging at his tie. A film of perspiration coated his forehead. The engineers, who had been silently witnessing the confrontation, exchanged uneasy glances. The air thrummed with unspoken anxieties. Thompson's voice, when it came, was a raspy whisper. "John Miller? That's impossible. Miller, he vanished years ago. Just disappeared. We assumed." His voice trailed off, unable to voice the unspoken conclusion. That John Miller had cracked under the pressure, a casualty of innovation, and vanished into obscurity. He stared at Billy, his eyes desperately seeking answers. The arrogance that had radiated from him moments before had evaporated, leaving a raw, unsettling vulnerability. The carefully constructed facade of the powerful CEO had shattered, revealing the fragile man beneath. You're his son?" Thompson croaked, barely audible. Billy offered a curt nod, the truth a heavy weight between them. Everything had shifted. The balance of power had been upended. Billy was no longer merely a farm boy tinkering with machinery. He was John Miller's son, and in that instant, Thompson understood the depth of his miscalculation. A second chance. The air remained stagnant, thick with the scent of dust still settling from the silenced machine. Thompson's gaze bored into Billy, his features a tableau of warring emotions. Incredulity, resentment, and a prickle of something deeper. Apprehension, perhaps? Oblivious or feigning disinterest in Thompson's inner turmoil, Billy swabbed grease from his hands with a greasy rag. "There," Billy declared, severing the quiet. "She'll hold. Needs a proper overhaul soon, but she'll see you through harvest." He carelessly tossed the rag atop a toolbox, a nonchalance that only amplified Thompson's irritation. A strained sound, barely a voice, escaped Thompson's throat. "Your father, he conceived this contraption, didn't he?" It wasn't a query, but an indictment, confirming a truth he'd long suppressed. Billy's simple nod was all the answer needed. "Yeah, called it his masterpiece. Years went into that design. Thompson pivoted, pacing a confined circuit in the parched earth. The sinking sun cast elongated, grotesque shadows across the expanse, mirroring the contorted path his ambition had carved. He recalled John Miller, youthful, ingenious, overflowing with groundbreaking concepts that promised to revolutionize agriculture. He also recalled his own hubris, his demanding nature, his insistence on shortcuts and inflated profits, the very things that had driven Miller away. Halting his pacing, his eyes locked on the harvester, then flicked back to Billy. I treated him unfairly, Thompson confessed, the words leaving a bitter residue. I recognized his brilliance, but I was too blind to appreciate his value. I relentlessly pushed him, demanding performance without providing the necessary support. I sought to control him. The admission hung, palpable and raw. Billy observed silently, allowing Thompson to grapple with specters from the past. Thompson edged closer to Billy, his eyes searching, probing. You possess his gift, his innate understanding of mechanics, his fervor. He paused, then pushed on. I committed a grave error with your father, one I refuse to repeat. He straightened his tie, an unconscious gesture betraying his unease. Billy, he began, his voice regaining a semblance of its usual authority, yet still tinged with vulnerability. I'd like to offer you an internship at Agritech Solutions. Work alongside our engineers, glean from their expertise, and, hopefully, impart some wisdom of your own. You'd have access to cutting-edge equipment, the latest technological advancements, a chance to genuinely impact the industry. Billy's eyebrows lifted in surprise. He hadn't foreseen this. He'd braced himself for anger, animosity, perhaps even legal action, not an overture. He scrutinized Thompson's expression, seeking any trace of deceit. Instead, he found only sincerity and a desperate plea for absolution. An internship, Billy echoed, weighing the proposition. He glanced towards the distant farmhouse, at the fields that had sustained his family for generations. Could he relinquish all this, even temporarily? Indeed, Thompson affirmed, his voice tinged with urgency. An opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities, to create something remarkable, and a chance for me to seek redemption. He paused, adding, consider a second chance for us both. Billy gave a measured nod. I'll consider it. A visible relaxation washed over Thompson, a burden seemingly lifted. He retrieved his phone, his fingers stumbling slightly as he navigated the screen. There's someone else I need to contact, he mumbled, scrolling through his contact list. Someone I owe a long overdue amends. He located the name, inhaled deeply, and initiated the call. Holding the phone to his ear, his gaze remained fixed on the horizon as the last sliver of sunlight vanished beyond the fields. John, he began, his voice hesitant, almost imploring. John Miller? This is Sterling Thompson. I know it's been an age, but I need to speak with you. About everything. He paused, listening to the response, his face a complex mosaic of anticipation and trepidation. Yes, I'm aware I made mistakes. Profound ones, and I intend to rectify them. I wish to bring you back to Agritech Solutions.